Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that dares to create content in order to educate and engage individuals on mental health awareness through pop culture. And on this episode, it's something special in particular, jumping out of our genre blast feed and into our conversations about mental health, depression, suicide, etc. I'm joined by writer director Liam Regan. He is the writer director behind the wonderful black comedy Eating-Miss-Campbell out now on the festival circuits from Troma-Films. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, buddy. How are you?
I am good. I'm really, really good. So this movie is absolutely bonkers. Let me just start there. Um, and I am having trouble when I was putting together my initial review. I had the biggest trouble actually trying to place into words the actual premise of this movie, because this movie is one of the very few films that I've come across that is it has a very busy narrative, but they all those moving parts manage to never step on top of each other, and somehow in the end all manage to come together. Can you kind of talk about the what this movie is and what makes it so crazy?
Okay, so I always find this a really hard question when people ask me what's the film about. It's essentially about a suicidal goth girl who is trapped inside a horror movie, and no matter how many times she tries to attempt suicide, she wakes up in another horror film. And the horror film she's currently in is titled Eating-Miss-Campbell. And in this horror film, her new reality, it's set in England, kind of. It's a fictional town called Henelot, but there's a new American school board, and the American school board feel that to bring revenue into the newly opened Henelot High School, they can host an all-you-can-eat massacre and sell the streaming rights to the highest bidder. Now, the all-you-can-eat massacre is an all-you-can-eat contest. However, the winner has the chance to either shoot up their high school or shoot themselves. And Beth finds this. Beth sees this as a way to escape horror movies for good, because the only way she can escape a horror movie is by blowing her brains out. And unfortunately, guns aren't really easy to access here in England, and this is her way to live in the romantic comedy she always wanted to. I think that kind of sums it up the best I could do, I think.
No, no, it absolutely does it. Like it kind of like dips into like spoiler territory I was trying to avoid, but that's
Whoops.
neither here nor
Whoopsie fucking
there,
daisy.
which is the catchphrase from the movie. Uh Yeah, so it's really interesting because what I feel like is fascinating about this movie, and I put this in our review, is this movie is like equal parts like offensive, but like also has like an amazing like really like just exceptional like commentary in this film. Like from what you talked about, like obviously like is addressing things like suicide, depression, and like school shootings, but then you like also get into like sexual assault, the Me Too movement. There's like a running gag in here, like some of the more like predatory characters like pray to the Weinstein gods, which I thought was brilliant. um bullying, kind of like the pedophilia. Can you kind of talk about what the process was like when you were writing the script and wanting to address all of these issues simultaneously and kind of have them all live within the real world? Because I think by having it, for as meta as this movie is, approaching all of these vast array of topics, it definitely gives the film a more grounded appeal.
No, of course. I mean, the whole writing process is quite interesting. So I made a film 7 years ago called My Bloody Banjo, which was my first ever film. It cost me only £15,000, which is like, I don't know, maybe $20,000. I think the pound is so weak right now, so maybe it's a little less than that. But I made that 7 years ago, and I was only 29 years old, and so I lost my mum when I was 16 years old, and I used to drink a lot. And I always wanted to make films, and I quit drinking at 24. And then I realized that um, I had to adapt to deal with these feelings. Now, they used to put me on antidepressants when it happened when I was 16. They put me on well, we call it over here fluoxetine, which is like a version of Prozac. And I really hated how manic it made me feel. And I feel like with quitting drinking, I didn't want to feel like I was controlled by something. So I didn't take any medication. So I didn't take any medication for the longest time. So when Banjo came out and the American distributors um, that are in Arizona, based in Arizona, they kind of like dumped the film on Amazon Prime, and then when they was sharing the film to review sites, it illegally got uploaded before the release. And to cut a long story short, I didn't make back my money on Banjo, and I never thought I'd be able to make a second movie again. And it took at least 5 or 6 years to even write another movie because I lost so much confidence in myself, put on loads of weight, and I was very insecure. I mean, there was other things going on in the background, not just the film thing, but it was definitely the failure of the first movie that inspired me to make. Well, it inspired me to write another. And so I went to Spain for. I went to Spain for a few weeks, but I wrote the first draft in 6 days. And I always wanted to. So when Columbine happened, I was 17. And I remember, I mean, it was such a big thing over in the UK. Whatever happens in America, is always prevalent here in the UK because we've only ever had one school massacre, and that was in Dunblane, Ireland, and I think it was 1993, where a guy went into we call it a nursery school. So it's like a nursery school is kind of kids maybe 4 or 5 years old, and he went in and he just massacred, I think it was like 10 or 15 of them. And that always stuck with me. I remember being in assembly, which it was beginning of class. And the teachers are saying, this would never happen here. We have security, etc. And now this is like the early 90s. And something like this was completely brand new. So that always stuck with me. And when Columbine happened, and there was lots of blame on the media, be it Marilyn Manson or like horror films or just alternative media, I guess, which I always found to be an escape. Because I used to be such a bullied kid, I used to come home, watch a trauma film, and I'd feel so much more better. That was my escape. So I wanted to always use the school massacre subplot, I guess you could call it. And also, I used to be a goth. I used to self-harm a lot when I was a kid. I mean, that's how I dealt with losing my mum when I was 16. I used to get so, what's the word? I used to get so exhausted and angry and upset. I did not know how to convey those feelings, and I used to, and I'm sure there's going to be like a trigger warning before this podcast because I know that we're going to be going through a lot of things that may upset people or bring up unwanted feelings. But I used to just find like in school or whatever, I used to find anything, break it, and like a CD or a ruler, and I used to gouge at my arm because that was the only way I could calm myself down. And it's kind of like breathe. It was like a release. Is the best way that I could describe it. So I wasn't dealing with things the best way possible, which is when I turned to drink, and that made things a lot worse because I was living week to week. I was just kind of bottling up all these feelings I had, losing a parent, and everything else when you're that age. And so I wanted to. So there's a few things here. Then the school massacre theme, the goth, the self-harming goth. Because when you're a writer, when you're a director, when you're creative, you write what you know. So I put myself a lot in this film, but I also like obviously the whole Weinstein thing was also a big prevalent thing, and sexual predators. I remember Corey Feldman coming out exposing what happened when he was younger. And to me, it's because I love trauma so much. I thought, well, what healthier way to deal with all this than with satire? And growing up on the likes of Lloyd Kaufman and Trey Parker and Matt Stone, I learned to kind of take something that's so tragic, but also kind of to discuss it. Let's make fun of it and take the power away in some way. I'm respectful of all these shows, even though when you feel in the UK, people kind of they don't look at the context of something; they just kind of take something out of context and not understand the commentary behind it. I mean, for example, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I'll just end with this. I went to I went to Colorado in August, and for the South Park 25th anniversary show, and I visited Columbine High School, and there's a memorial there, and all the 13 students that died, the parents wrote something about each student. And I just remember reading each plaque and breaking down and being so upset. But then the realization that this wasn't just a one-off incident, this is something that happens all the time. It made the whole thing more tragic, but also it's just so sad that nothing was learned when that happened. Um, So I wanted to deal with all these things in one movie, and I knew that if I was ever going to make one more film, it needed to count. And I always feel like I say, you write what you know, you write your, I guess, interests, however morbid they are, and you know that became eating-miss-campbell.
I feel like there's so much to unpack with what you just
Sorry.
said.
Yes.
You're fine, but I think the one thing that I think we as Americans can forget sometimes is how different like and uncommon school shootings are for other individuals. And um side note, I'm really glad you brought Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Because there's a great episode of South Park where like Wendy breaks up with Stan and like he becomes goth. And I thought that was like that episode to me has like always been like such an interesting episode to like deal with heartbreak, and kind of like really is like a reminder that like there's like no right or wrong way to grieve, because like even a broken heart, like you're grieving that like you had something and then you lost something. And like it's really interesting to hear that kind of like that was like the route that you took. And so I kind of want to jump into we'll be jumping in and out of Miss Eating Miss Campbell the entire episode, so stick with us. um but yeah, so you brought it up previously, like the subjects of school shootings are in like America, it seems to like happen like once a week. Whereas like places like where you are over across the pond, it's like you guys experienced it once. It was in Ireland. It was in the early 90s, and learned how to say, all right, this is what happened, and we're never ever gonna deal with, like we're gonna put measures into place to make sure this doesn't happen again. And
Mhm.
I think this film really smartly deals with that. Um, and has a really makes a wonderful satire because of it.
Thank you. No, completely. And it's really interesting to read the reviews because I'm always on Letterboxd or IMDb, and I want to know what people,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah.
good thing and a bad. It's a good thing and a bad thing. In fact, I remember the film played in London, Leicester Square, was a sold out screening, 9 p.m. on a Friday night, over 300 people. And I was on such a high, just a complete high. It was like it's so weird with these things because you spend years making them and then it happens and it's like, oh, you know. So I remember being just sitting on the toilet, as you do, scrolling on your phone at like 3 a.m. after I came back in from the night out. And I just remember seeing all these like scathing reviews about how I was, I guess, making fun of tragedies. I think really they were trying to say it was in bad taste, etc. But to me, it's really interesting because it's all valid. Art is subjective, and I think you do take from it what you sometimes project, and or just kind of what you digest. But to me, it was either a failure in how I wrote and directed it, or they just couldn't see past. And this is one thing I love about Troma, by the way. Troma, when you see it on the surface, it's very much like a live action cartoon. It's very, I'm not going to use schlocky because I don't agree. Schlocky is when you don't care. Troma cares. It's very kind of gory and over the top and slapstick, very much akin to British humor, be it Monty Python or Young Ones or Bottom, which is, I guess, what, brought me to Troma. But Troma always has these political messages. It's all layered. And this is why I feel like too many people take what on the surface from Troma, but Troma creates very intelligent movies like Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, that deals with fast food, and then you got the Toxic Avenger that deals with the environment. And Citizen Toxie did deal with Columbine. He dealt with abortions. He dealt with plastic surgery. He dealt with a lot of these hot button issues. And by the way, with Columbine happening in 1999. Citizen Toxie was filmed in 1999, and I thought that was very brave of Lloyd Kaufman to deal with something just so close, especially and so close to home as well. And I feel like Lloyd being a huge kind of, I mean, he's the reason why I got into filmmaking to begin with. I always wanted to kind of make my own satire, but make it accessible, because it's okay to make a British satire, but to me, I've been so engulfed with American media. I grew up as a video shop kid renting films from the video shop. There were always American films. I'd watch American sitcoms, be Roseanne, Frasier, Cheers, all the and American films. I was never really interested in the homegrown kind of thing, apart from the more slapstick side. So yeah, to me, I always just thought this could be my chance to make a satire, and yeah. I think that was that the question. I'm not sure. Sorry, buddy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it answered most of it. Before we jump into a lot of this more of your story and kind of the sobriety journey that you've had, and kind of also how suicide was affected into this production. I gotta ask, man, one 90s kid to another, like the title sequences for this movie this is another movie why people should check this movie out, is like a punk rock Rugrats. Where did this idea come from, and like how hard was it to kind of like make sure that like it looked like a lot of like time and effort went into such a minor part of the movie?
Yeah, I think going into making the movie, I wanted to make a R-rated Nickelodeon film, because I grew up on Nickelodeon as a kid, and I'd watch Rugrats, Doug, Our Real Monsters, and everything. It's to me, I always loved the bright colors, and that was definitely an inspiration on eating-miss-campbell. So I was like, okay, we need an opening intro, and I'm trying to think like, what to me defined my kind of like 90s childhood. Hey, there we go. Nice.
I just pulled out my Double Dare hat for those at home.
I just thought, well, why not Rugrats? And I actually painstakingly looked at the intro, and we looked at the screenshot, like the actual individual frames of that intro, and my graphic designer Gareth Gibson, who he has an Instagram, Gibson Graphics. Gibson Graphics. He does amazing artwork. We're like, okay, so how do we make this our own? So we took the Ronnie character from Banjo pointing a gun. We took this fictional company called the Capulet Corporation, which you can see on little things in eating-miss-campbell and Banjo. It's very world building, and burgers, and we just kind of wanted to make this kind of like acid trip Nickelodeon Rugrats intro, and I think we pulled it off. But again, with the movie, it was very Nickelodeon influenced, with like the green slime and the orange and the bright colors, and it was. I guess you could say that was like kind of my tribute to.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now, and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, so it's interesting the way that Eating-Miss-Campbell deals with the subject, kind of getting into heavier stuff. Trigger warning now. It's interesting the way that Miss Campbell deals with depression and suicide in this, and this is kind of like, I think with my first viewing, I was kind of like, again, a lot like the initial people where you're just like looking at the surface and you're like, oh man, this is kind of like passively like kind of like looking down on people with suicide. But I think this film shows both sides of suicide, where like you have a girl that's very open and honest with the fact that like she has depression and she doesn't want to live anymore. But then you also have the dean of the school that at one point in the movie actually says, she's one horror movie away from shooting up a school. And you're kind of like, and they kind of, him and his number one boy, Clyde. Every time that line came on, it always cracked me up. So I had to throw it in there. Every time that they were on this, like that particular sequence, they're sitting down, they're talking with her parents, and they're kind of like making light of this. And I feel like this film, when it comes to like a satire, does a really well at like commentating on the twofold of how we look at suicide. You have the individual that's going through it and kind of what they're feeling and like experiencing feelings with them. And then on the flip side, you have the way that like society kind of looks at them and kind of really doesn't understand them. So we just initially tend to write them off.
Completely. No, I completely agree. And I feel because, I've watched so many films that deal with, I guess, suicidal characters. And I think, everyone deals with it in a different way for sure, but I do feel like sometimes it can be fetishized. Depression, they kind of like just play, when they play sad music and everything. And it feels, from someone who's dealt with it, and this is just my opinion, it just feels pandering in a way. And depression isn't just a one-way street. You can be the happiest goth. You can, because she is a very outgoing, outspoken goth. Yes, she wears black, but she is a very, I would say she's like the character that the audiences see the whole world through. She's stuck in this cartoony horror film, and which she mentions many times. I want to escape this shitty horror movie once and for all. It's kind of, to me, she's like being a fat kid in school and saying you're fat before anyone else can say that. So you're owning, kind of who you are. but also like, like I deal with mental health issues even today. But now I'm older, I find healthier ways to deal with it. I was like, I didn't want Beth to be the depressed goth caricature that you see in many films and media. I wanted her to be a very strong-willed protagonist, and to me, she uses her depression to kind of to push her through, because she has morals. She's like, I will not stand for the school massacre. I won't stand for even to me. I always liked to kind of deal with the whole veganism thing as well, because I'm not vegan by all. I have friends that are vegan, and I think it's morally a fantastic thing. But I like this idea of her, I don't want to eat meat, but if I'm able to, kill bad people and devour the meat, then, and there's a whole commentary there as well with, are people just shades of gray? Is there good and bad in this world? Because even the protagonist is immoral in some ways. She does bad things just as much as the antagonist. And to me, it's just her trying to find her way in the world. And she's one, and also, I mean, I don't want to go in spoiler territory, but she's wanting this romantic comedy. And, growing up as a kid, listening to a lot of pop punk bands and emo bands and very angsty bands, I always thought that the only thing I need in life is a partner, and that's it. That's the happy ending. And films have definitely showed that. And after heartbreak after heartbreak, I was like, well, maybe there's something else bigger. Maybe I just need to, find what makes me happy. And to me, creating characters and living vicariously through these characters whilst writing them, that helps.
Yeah, because like storytelling in a way is like a form of therapy. And initially, just to kind of be vulnerable myself, the reason that this episode we started talking about this is because originally we covered Eating-Miss-Campbell for one of the festivals that it had done, and Genre Blast. Shout out to our friends Nathan and Chad here in Virginia. And they run such a great festival. If you guys are ever in the area, I think it's Labor Day weekend every year. Please stop by. But yeah, and you had gotten a hold of my review of the film and really loved what we kind of stood about. And we actually initially started talking about mental health, and this episode kind of initially stemmed from the idea of bringing you on to kind of talk about your own depression and your own sobriety journey and kind of stuff like that, because we hear victims and villains. We believe that like the more we have these types of conversations, the less likely they're surrounded in stigma. And that's one of the reasons I really admire Eating-Miss-Campbell, is because I feel like it openly addresses these. We've talked a lot about how this movie was kind of like almost like a therapy for you. But aside from, I guess like my big question is like, where for you, like where does like depression actually start if it ends like with these characters?
That's a really great question. I don't know if I have an answer to that. To me, the best way to deal with depression with these characters is just kind of laughing at the absurdity of life. I guess is just, to me, taking a gun into a school and senselessly killing people. That's such an absurd idea, and that it's still going on is so absurd. And also just the idea of just being able to like just losing people. So, I met my best friend, Blade Braxton, who played the Midnight Rose in the film. I met him on a trauma set in 2012. Now, it was always my dream as a kid to work on a trauma film. And being a kid in the UK, how do I get to do that? I'd have to fly myself out to America. So when I became sober, I started reading books on screenwriting. Two books, Save the Cat by Blake Snyder and Screenplay by Sid Field. Fantastic screenwriting books. I would read them cover to cover. And because I lost my mom at 16, she always wanted me to. I mean, I always wanted to be a filmmaker ever since I was a kid. I always wanted to make, create, and she always wanted to like push me into that realm. And when she passed, like I think when she passed, I didn't know what I wanted. I was a 16-year-old kid, and all I was really doing is getting drunk every week and just being very self-destructive. And that's with self-harm and everything else. So when I got my act together, I guess when I heard Lloyd was shooting another Troma movie, it's like, fuck it, I've got to fly myself out there. I didn't know anybody, and I worked on Return to Duke High in the summer of 2012, sleeping on the floor of an abandoned funeral home with like 60 other people and two showers, the Troma way. And I heard, I met this guy, and he was talking, and we really got on because I loved wrestling as well as I used to love wrestling. And I'm like, hey man, your voice, it sounds familiar. I don't know, are you on a TV show or something? And he's like, oh no, I run this podcast called Wrestle Crap, and I listened to the Wrestle Crap podcast since I was like 20, 21, 22. I just find it so surreal that two people can meet, and it's like, oh my God, I will listen to you years ago. And I had no idea you also like Troma. And we just got on like a house on fire. And Blade Braxton, he started one of the first ever wrestling podcasts. He wrote books, Wrestle Crap books. And he was also a massive Troma fan. So we always had that friendship. And because I work a lot of night shifts here in the UK, whenever I'm working nights, he was always up, and we'd talk every single night without fail. And he had a character called the Midnight Rose, who is like this wrestling manager, and he's, that was his gimmick. He's cameoed in many films, and he used to go to a lot of wrestling matches being a manager. And in 2013, we went to the Cannes Film Festival together to promote the Troma film Return to Duke High. And then when I filmed my first movie, Banjo, I flew out to Kansas City where he lived, and he let me sleep in his room. He slept on the couch, and we visited the Child's Play 3 location together, because Child's Play 3 is one of my favorite horror sequels of all time. And he was just the nicest guy. So when it came to writing Eating-Miss-Campbell, I wanted to cast my friends. So this was in so I was writing it in June 2019, and then I'm like, we're going to shoot in January 2020, no matter what. If that means me taking out credit cards or loans, which I had to, and whatever savings I had, I made sure that I was going to self-finance the movie. I mean, Troma threw us a bit of money as well, but it was, I'd say 95% of it. I'd say 98% of it. I put the money into the film. So Blade, when he heard I was filming, he says, "Oh man, I'll come out." I'm like, "Oh great, dude! I'll write the Midnight Rose in the film." And he's like, "Oh brother, you don't have to do that." I'm like, no, I want to. So he flew himself out on his own dime in January 2020. And we filmed the first half of we filmed what we thought was the whole Eating-Miss-Campbell. And then we realized that we had more reshoots to do, because then the pandemic happened just soon after. So that shut down the production for 18 months. So when you watch Eating-Miss-Campbell, there is January 2020. You probably, if you ever watch it again, you can probably see that. But we try to hide that fact. So when I was rewriting the script in early 2021 to shoot that summer, I wanted Blade to be a big part of it, with Midnight Rose character. And it's going to be a bookended piece where at the end we have the all-you-can-eat in the high school, but it was going to with the Midnight Rose hosting, so it's kind of bookended. And I was, sending pages to Blade, and we're all laughing because I'm putting this like Fraser Crane reference in, and just all these references that would make me and Blade laugh. I mean, even when I watch the movie now, there's so many hidden references, hidden jokes that me and Blade would only know about, but that's what makes them funnier for me. And during the pandemic, we kept each other sane we'd watch a Troma DVD every other night because we've got a vast Troma DVD collections, and we were like the geekiest nerds about Troma. We just talk about the original Silver Spines and just the geekiest stuff you could even imagine. Now, Blade never suffered, like as in well, suffer is not the right word. He would never get down about things. So and I'm someone who can be a very erratic person. I take sertraline, which I think is called Zoloft in America. I can I still have depression patches, and to me, to combat that, I need to keep busy. I need to write. I need to create. I need to do something with a film or a film. But Blade would always, as the Monty Python song would go, look on the bright side of life. Like, he was 10 years older than me. He owned his own business, and he traveled the world, and he did what he wanted to do. He wasn't married. He didn't have kids. He was, to me, the embodiment of punk rock, but a hardworking punk rocker. And he was always smiles, and he'd be always laughing. And it was such a shock when we lost him, because I because I have a group of Troma friends. They all love Blade. Everyone loves Blade, that new Blade. And it was so weird because I got a call one morning, and this was like March 2021, and it was Ben, who also works on Troma-Films. He worked on #Shakespeare Shitstorm, Lloyd's latest, and he's like, "Hey man, do you have another phone number for Blade? We're trying to get in contact with him." And I'm like, "Nah, man, I've only got the phone number that you've all got. Is everything all right?" And he's like, "Well, he tried." So something happened, and something happened, and he like ran away from the place. So he was staying in an apartment with another Troma friend called Derek, who was one of my closest friends. And so I tried to message Blade all that day. "Hey man, no one's mad at you. Do you want to? Is everything all right? Please get in touch. We're all really worried, sick." And I just had a feeling that at that moment that something was wrong. And I remember sending the message, and on Facebook Messenger, when you send a message and it's just like, it doesn't like go completely blue or whatever color, it just shows that it's sent, but it's not been received. I was like, okay, that's weird. Maybe his phone's dead or whatever. And then so one day passes, and then a second day passes, and I was hoping I was going to wake up and see that he's replied back, and there was no reply, and there was another kind of sense of dread there. And I'm like speaking to my sister, and I'm saying something's wrong here, and she's like, "Oh, he'll be fine. He's probably just fallen out with one of them, and he's just gone home back to Kansas City or whatever." And I'm like, "No, man, something feels wrong here." And I kept sending him messages, and there was nothing. And then on the third day, my friend Ben, who originally contacted me asking where the whereabouts of Blade, he said, "I hate to say this, man, but he's gone." And I just broke down. It completely destroyed me. Like, I've never felt that type of grief and loss since I lost my mum. And obviously during that time, I have lost grandparents, I have lost friends, but Blade was somebody that, it was such a constant in my life from one point that I could always count on Blade. Blade was always going to be around no matter what. And we had so many great times in America together, be it on Shitstorm or Return to Nukem High, or when I went to Kansas City, or when he flew over here and all my British friends got to meet him and they all fell in love with this guy. He's a guy that lived life. And, what really happened with Blade is because when he used to wrestle, he dealt with really bad concussions, and his concussions went undiagnosed for the longest time. And he'd always say that he had really bad headaches. He never, I don't know if he never could afford to get it checked out or anything, but he'd always, suffer from really bad concussions. And it sounds like just one night he just snapped, he left. And I still don't know what happened. And I really don't want to know, because to me, it's hard. It's even hard to accept today. Like I deal with it okay, but there'll be days I'll just break down crying, and there'll be days where I'm just like, "Where's my friend that I can't speak to anymore?" And it sucks, man. Like it was in like the pandemic was still rearing its ugly head, and I wanted to fly out to the funeral, and I just couldn't. Like there were so many flights where I had to go from one to another that I wouldn't be able to get there in time. And because the funeral was such like a quick turnaround, it was so weird, man. And to me, I think the saddest part about it all was, so there was a GoFundMe for Blade's funeral, and his sister asking for 10 grand, and in the end, I think it raised like 40 to 50 grand altogether in such a short amount of time, and that just goes to show the impact he had on people and how much we all loved him. And to me, the sobering part of it all was realizing that no matter how much money we would raise, it would never bring him back. And also, when you're gone, it's forever, right? And I mean, I'd like to think there's an afterlife. I really do. I would love that because I would love nothing more than to spend eternity hanging out with Blade and just laughing and everything else. But when it's the unknown and it feels so definitive, that it makes you look at your own mortality and you realize we're not here for a long time. And it's also quite poetic, I guess, with what the film deals with as well. And to me, it's like, oh, this happens every fucking day, and I've gone through it, and I just never thought Blade would be the one I'd lose at all because he's always looked on the bright side of life, and to me, his death has certainly made me have a different outlook on life and just have as much fun and raise as much hell and just be so punk rock, in the heart and always be young at heart as well. But when that happened, I had to rewrite the script, and that was hard to know that he wasn't going to be on set or I was ever going to see him again. Because the last time I actually saw him in person, I was dropping him off at the Manchester airport for him to fly back after Miss Campbell, the first leg of Miss Campbell, and we hugged, and I just thought, hey, I'm going to see you very soon, and we kept in touch obviously every single night, but I never thought that would have been the final time I was going to see my best friend. And it still messes me up. I mean, I had to up my antidepressant, the meds, because it was hard to deal with. And like I can either be in complete tears or I can just be down about it, or there is those golden times where you can be like, I am so privileged to have known that guy, and I'm so privileged, to call him a friend. And to me, those are the memories that you've got to you've got to hold on to, because he wouldn't want any of us to be down about it. He wanted us to keep making movies and raising hell and just having such a fun time. And it's one thing I will say is, like, in when I watch the film with an audience, I don't get sad. If anything, I look forward to seeing him and seeing him on the screen, because that's where he deserves to be. And it's nice. I think the best thing about film, dude, is that you can immortalize people. People live forever on film, and I feel like with film itself, that is a way to live forever. You leave something behind, and he definitely left behind a huge impression on everyone that loved him. And it's kind of hard to convey how he was so much bigger than life. He was such a larger than life personality. But yeah, man, it's sad, it's tragic, but at the same time, it's a sobering reminder that we're not here for long. And I'm 37 years old. Next year I turn 38, and my mum was 38 when she passed. She passed at a young age, and that also kind of is a reminder of, I just want to do what I've always dreamt of doing, no matter what. And if it means me taking out loans or getting in a shitload of debt, I would rather do that than not at all. So Sorry, I went on a huge spiel there. Sometimes I don't know how to end these spiels.
No, and like just to clarify for listeners, because like you had confided in me in this, and like I just want to make sure that like I'm using the proper language, is that like unfortunately you told me that Blade had actually like taken his own life.
Yeah.
And I think what's fascinating about your story is like I see so many similarities to like my own stories, to where like
Mhm.
um I lost my grandmother. I was really close to her at a young age, and kind of like went through like depression, and like then started kind of getting into not necessarily filmmaking, but like I did music. I eventually got into content creation like this, but it was actually the loss of my own friend to suicide. And suicide, like for those that like have never lost anyone to suicide, I pray that you can live out the end of your days and never feel that pain. Because that type of pain is like it's indescribable. Because like whether you're, I don't know, like it feels like a haze, almost like the days leading up, and like I'm sure that you probably still to some degree like feel that. It's like uh I I recently, a couple years ago, actually had it had been 10 years since I lost Adam, and um it's like 12 going on 13 now, but like to me like it's so weird to like grasp like that, like a person was here and then like chose not to be here anymore. And I think what's interesting, you talk about Blade, is like is how surprising it is when you lose someone to suicide, because like I feel like, for me at least, I wasn't like at the time, like I was really ignorant of like suicide like warning signs and like depression, and how immediately something like that completely just like flips your world upside down. It's where you're like, oh, like you're replaying moments and you're like, this XYZ could have been different, like, and what could I have said, what could I have done, how could this interaction have like been altered to like maybe they would still be with me.
Completely. It's those kind of thoughts that it's quite crippling in a way, because there is, like, all the time that Blade would say, for example, like, oh, I've got really bad headache, why didn't I say, well, maybe you need to get checked out, or maybe we can do something to because when there was a post-mortem, his sister phoned me and they said that they saw like a shadow or something on the front of his brain. But there's all those warning signs that you just kind of, and I was just like you, buddy. For a long time, I was very ignorant to depression and suicide, and not realizing that I was depressed. I was very much kind of too proud to admit when I became sober that I was depressed, because I hated the idea of having to take medication. But I'll say this, and this is just from personally speaking, because it doesn't work for everybody. But I would say that you know, antidepressants have certainly saved my life. I don't think I'd still be here if it wasn't for them. I now feel like I used to be when I was younger, carefree, and I didn't, have, it just helps me get through the day without an exercise and working out. But yeah, all the warning signs and everything that you wish you could have just kind of intervened. And to me, this is what these days now, like I just been to Fright Fest where the film played, and I see all my friends there. I take and I make it a point to tell them how much I love them and how much I appreciate them. And I say it to some people, and they're like, "Why are you saying this kind of thing?" And to me, it's because you just don't know when someone's day is going to be over. And to me, it's always better to remind people how much they mean to you, and not rather than not being able to tell that to them after the fact. And to me, and I'm sure with yourself, you've experienced this as well, is the dreams you'll have about your friend still being here, or the dreams that you have where it was all a hoax, it never happened, or the dreams where they come back and it's like, oh my God, it never happened. And then it's the realization of when you wake up, it's that cruel kind of dream where, it's nice to visit them, but you just wish that, you could manifest it to be a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another like parallel in like our stories is like going through also like depression, like being really ignorant of it, because like I was probably like 10 or 11 the first time that I ever experienced depression. And I didn't like it as like a 10 and 11-year-old because of like I don't know how it is over in where you are, but like here in America, like we don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about mental health with kids, and especially being a male. Like, you're kind of talked about, just like shake it off, like, dive in. It's gonna get better, buck up, stuff like that. And so like I didn't really have a name for it. I didn't have a thing for it. And so like much like you with trauma, like I turned to like becoming a cinephile. Like that was kind of my escape. And it really, really helped me. And then I would probably say like 16, 17 was like the height of like my like depression and kind of like not wanting to live anymore. And um then I jumped into then I lost Adam, and so it was kind of like, oh, it was like it kind of like was the equivalent of like life being like a snow globe, to where you've been still for so long and you've kind of become like numb in that environment, and then someone comes along and like shakes it up and like flips the script and said like, had your depression been severe enough, or like had you like taken your own life, like this would be how your parents are processing. This would be how your uh sister is processing, your friends, your coworkers. And like you described like a life, like you that dream, like euphoria, where it's like, I guess like euphoria is not really the right word. Like it's almost like a nightmare state where you do like you imagine like, okay, like, hey, like I'm gonna see this person tomorrow. And it's like crazy because like, you go into like a place, like I worked with this guy, so like I went into like work and I was seeing him 5 days a week, and I was expecting like there was a level of expectation there, and it's just like, oh, like I'm just never gonna see this person again. Like that doesn't compute in my brain.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
It's such a weird bitter pill to swallow, the whole this person is no more. And to me, we've all grown up learning what death is and what life is, but it's only until you lose someone so close that you realize how definitive it is. And and then you think of what eternity is and what forever is. And forever is a long time, and that is even sadder. That's even more tragic. And like you, man, many parallels where I was very ignorant and very much like, oh, and I grew up in the 90s when my dad, very working class. He'd tell me to, buck up, cheer up, uh, why the sad face, fucking cheer, just that kind of, you shouldn't be sad. But I always knew, I experienced depression at a very young age, that kind of like just melancholy kind of feeling and not knowing what it is or why you felt that way. But it was just kind of like you say, haze that goes over you at such a young age, and you don't know what it is. And I feel like I've always had it, and it was only when I stopped being such a depressed, because I'm very lucky in life. Like, in the westernized world, we're very lucky people. And I feel like I always had the attitude of, oh, well, everything's fine. People just need to book. I took the same attitude that my dad used to show me. And then I then I then realized, why am I struggling? Why am I having such a hard time with things? And I'm like, shit, I'm just like all these other people that are saying they're depressed. I'm just too proud to admit it. And I think and to me, it's a bit of arrogance as well, I guess, because you feel like, well, I don't need a crutch anymore when you quit drinking. I don't need alcohol. I don't need anything. And I don't want to be on something. But to me, the antidepressants have very much leveled me out. Like, I'm such a more grounded person. I don't think I would have been able to make a second movie without the help. But it's not just you, and I'm not saying you've got to take them and everything will be better. No, you've got to work. You've got to work just as hard. It's the, to me, the antidepressants, the exercise, the working out, and obviously just try and um, not be positive, but just be easy on yourself. Because I think, we come from a generation where, I feel like, even though I'm 37, I feel like I'm 26, probably, or in my early 20s. Like, my mentality is very, I'm much more mature than I was, but I'm much more young at heart and young at mind. Where I'm sure our parents, when they were our age, they were, married, having kids, settled down already. And I feel like this world is a completely different place now, which also opens up to, I don't know if it has anything to do with the media we grew up on as well. As in the Disney films, everyone had a happy ending, and every song on the radio was a love song. And I'm not sure if that kind of made us measure ourselves up to society's standards, because I felt like I'm only really happier now because I feel like I broke that mold. And I'm like, if I can focus on something I can control, like filmmaking and creating things, and then dealing with my emotions through characters, to me, as you said earlier, is the best kind of therapy. It's so therapeutic. And to me, you look at it, it's like, huh, this is what I'm saying, And to me, it's nice when people can find that. But it's whatever. My sister married, 2 kids. She's happy, and I love that. And this is why different things work for different people. But I do feel that there is something about the 90s kids that grew up with a lot of this kind of stimuli of things where you're like, oh, why am I missing that? And I'm not blaming it or anything at all, because I don't believe in blaming media for anything. But I do feel like there is this kind of expectation.
Yeah, like growing like up in the 90s, like we're close in age, but we're a few years apart. And I think it's really interesting when you like look at like the 90s kids that grew up, because like you said, like we grew up on like happy endings. We grew up on like positive love songs. And I think that like even though like, you know, for at least for my generation, I think that we also like we had our foot in that 90s era, but we also had the foot in like the groundwork for social media. So it's
Yeah.
like, MySpace, Zanga, Facebook, Twitter, that list goes on and on. And so like now you have this like these like expectations for life needs to be happy, and then social media flips that perspective to where it's like you need to portray your life as such. And that's kind of like why for me, like you talked about kind of like your uh kind of like your escape for depression and kind of stuff like that, and kind of like how it ended up like some of your depression like led to like drinking and alcoholism. And for me, and I've shared this on the podcast before, is like my mine left to like a really unhealthy relationship with horror movies, which I have since worked through. Um, but then on the flip side of that, like I also had like a crippling addiction to pornography, where like I just go check out our episode on pornography addiction to kind of hear a little bit more about that. But like for me, like I don't know, it was just an escape for me, and I don't really know how to like else to put it. Like it just it messed me up for a long time, both mentally, like identity wise, and like also like as a husband, messed me up. But like I would find my that would be kind of like my like anchors as far as like where I would run. And then like um I feel like probably in like my mid 20s I got more serious about like faith, and like started pursuing a relationship with God, and kind of like really started to turn my life around, and get more serious about that kind of stuff. And so like now, like content creation like this has been such a relief to create, because much like what you said earlier, like if I'm gonna make a second feature, I want to make it count. And so like in producing a podcast like this, if I'm gonna have a platform, I want to make it count. I want to deconstruct these issues like suicide, depression, school shootings, sexual assault. Like these are the conversations that like I want to have week in and week out.
Completely, and it's important. And as you said, with social media, it shows this. It feels like we fabricate this life that we wish for it to be. And I think also depression can start with a lot of people where their real life doesn't really measure up to all the filters that you put on there. And with that as well, it's to me, I think it's good to be vulnerable. I think it's good to be open. I think it's good just to tell the truth about things. When I'm introducing the film, I'm very open and I tell people, look, I'm going to work on Monday at my day job, because I remember going to film festivals and thinking, oh, these people are living the dream. They're traveling all over. But in reality, they've got second jobs, they've got third jobs. They're
Yeah.
the real people. There's no money in this, real money. And at the end of the day, it's like if I can tell someone that I work in telecommunications just like you or whatever, then hopefully that'll inspire them to make a film, because I do feel like it can be quite clicky and quite kind of, oh, we're artists, we're this, we're that. And at the end of the day, we're just people telling stories, and I feel
Yeah.
like if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's not it's not a secret club or anything. I mean, there is people that think it's a secret club, but to me, but to me, the most punk rock thing you can do is just make shit happen. And uh, uh, take something from your soul and from your heart and just put it out there for people, like your good self to, deconstruct and see what I'm trying to say and not take it at face value. It's kind of like, to me, it's like when, I used to get bullied a lot when I used to be like fully goth and paint my nails. People just take me on face value, not knowing who I was, what I was going through, or anything like that, really. And I feel like that's a great representation of the film. Yes, you can take it on face value, you can call it offensive or whatever, but what's it actually trying to say? And I feel like, there's too much cookie cutter kind of media out there, which is just kind of disposable. I remember buying a CD album in the 90s, I'll try to say early 2000s. And, I'd buy it and I'd listen to it again and again and again and again. And I think how people view media now is it goes in one ear, comes out the other, and it's disposable, like a film. Okay, 90 minutes, it's done. They'll never rewatch that film, where I'd watch a film, I'd listen to Derek's commentary, I would really drill down. And I feel like because life is so fast moving now with with social media, as you said, and just the amount of streaming channels, we're kind of this overstimulation where, when I was a kid, my mom had to, when she was still alive, she imported me Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS from America because it was banned over here. But there was that excitement of being able to watch something that you're not supposed to watch. But now I just think that we're so overwhelmed with the media. It's so easy to take things on face value. And I can understand some of the reviews. And I'm not saying that, Eating-Miss-Campbell is, it, to me, it is what it is. It's just, it's not trying to be anything. It's not trying to pull a fast one on people. You can take it from the surface, or you can actually drill down to understand what I'm trying to say. And to me, that's the best kind of any creative endeavor. It's kind of like, you listen to me, the songs, when I listen to music, the songs are the songs that last from the albums that you have to listen to a few times to understand and see the layers. It's not just some kind of poppy track that is in one ear and it's disposable. It's this is why there's songs that you can still listen to today and they're fresh, because it's not just what's on the surface, it's everything else that it's embodying.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you just said. Like, I mean, like I'm a media nerd, so like I grew up like if I bought it like a new album, like I was sitting down with those like lyrics and like I was like meditating on those. And like with film, like I'm the same way. Like it's the reason that like I still collect physical media, is because like there's something like rewarding to like my mental health, like when I can like pop in a Blu-ray, or like you mentioned VHS. I still collect VHS. I actually have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a Christmas gift from my my podcast host over at the That's High Praise. But yeah, so it's really interesting to kind of talk about, because like I love hearing the process of like filmmaking, and like I love like reading like interviews with people, or like listening to commentaries, or like podcasts where people talk about their like creative endeavors. Like we're recording this the weekend of Hellraiser's release over here in America, and I've read so many interviews with Jamie Clayton and David Bruckner and Clive Barker. Like, I mean, and just like I'm just like soaking it in, because I love the filmmaking process, and I love talking with filmmakers like yourself. It's probably one of the I won't really say rewarding, but it's one of my favorite parts of doing this podcast and like doing Victims and Villains, is because like, yes, we started off talking about like the filmmaking process, but like we've also kind of like peeled back the layers and kind of talked about how this film kind of came to be. And for one of the things that I'm really interested in is like you talked about like being 12 and like not 12 but like feeling like the depression and kind of stuff like that. Like at what point and you also talked about the self mutilation that you would do to yourself with the CDs and stuff. At what point did a lot of that depression kind of grow into self-harm and alcoholism for you?
Oh, so much. Like, I mean, I started self-harming. Like, I always knew that there was something. I had a cloud. I couldn't explain why I was
Sure.
down, and then when I was 15, 16, and I didn't know how to kind of convey these thoughts to anybody, because it's such a it's not even so much a taboo thing. It's just like, what is it? I would just kind of get so worked up that I would, self-harm just to kind of calm myself down. It was like a calming mechanism. And then when I went into drink, the drinking became the calming mechanism. But when I would become over emotional after drinking too much, then I would make a mess of things, be it friendships, just, completely just falling out with people, and just kind of ostracizing myself is probably the best way to put it. Just making myself be a bit of a pariah, I guess, like just someone that, we'd all have fun, but because I was still dealing with a lot of mental anguish with losing my mom, and obviously just the depression cloud I've always had, it was hard. When you drink, it can go down a few different paths, and it can go down a really dark path. And I think for me, I'd like break a bottle, and I'd just like cut myself, and like people didn't want to deal with that, and rightfully so. But I think it's because I wasn't, I never took care of myself whatsoever. And in England, you guys have, like, in America, obviously gun culture, etc. We have a drinking culture, which I think it's just as damaging, if I'm completely honest. Like, it's ruined so many lives, and it's kind of in England, the work, especially because I'm from like a working class, town, region, that people go to work, then they go to the pub, they drink, and then they come home, and it's like such a kind of cyclic kind. It's like just an ongoing thing. You live week to week, and I used to go to punk rock shows and metal shows and everything, and that was an escape, just to drink and just to get wasted, and just because I used to be a really shy kid. The only way you can talk to people is by some liquid confidence. And to me, I quit drinking when I was 24. And when I was 24, I felt so old. Like, I felt like I lived a long life. Like, I went through so much shit that I felt like, oh my God, I'm so old at 24. But when I look back, it's like 24 is no age. Like, what the fuck? I was so young when I quit drinking. And it wasn't so much. Yeah, right. If I'm 37 now, it's like, fuck, 24. But I think, sobering up, I then had to like deal with the grief of losing my mom, and like just everything else I had to deal with head on. And that was hard because I didn't have the alcohol anymore to kind of dilute the pain or whatever. But I got back into my love of films, because as a kid I would watch films again and again. But when drinking came around, films went on the back burner. So, I've amassed this huge. I have a walk-in DVD wardrobe, and I fucking like you love physical media. I own. To me, it's something about owning something tangible. It gives you a connection to that media, that be it DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, Laserdisc. I fucking love Laserdisc. It's just because to me, it's like I look at a lot of these films, be it like Full Moon or Troma. Those are the things that got me through. Nice, yes, gorgeous, gateful. Yeah. So laserdiscs, just like vinyl, to me, it needs to have a comeback, because it is something you can hold, and it's a piece of art. It really is, especially those Full Moon, the guys that make the Puppet Master movies and everything. Their artwork during the '90s, and even Troma, like the artwork is just so nice. To have. So to me, yeah, man, I forget what the question was, but I was thinking about how much I love physical media.
It's fine, man. I always, and just for like, because this is an audio podcast, I just showed Liam my copy of Face Off on a laser disc.
Yes.
I always love showing like younger people Face Off, because like they sound so old. They don't like, they've never seen it, or like they've never heard of it, and they're just like, well, like what is this? Like there's like media formats that like I just have like uncovered like this year. And like one of them was, which was like a really short-lived one, was like they made them on these like really large floppy disks. I don't remember the format name, but like yeah, it was really wild. One of the people I follow on TikTok like showed him, yeah, it's like, I got an entire basket of this. I was like, what? Like this thing must have like lived about as long as HD DVD.
Right? Yeah. No. Yeah. And I love dead formats. And like, I remember the VCDs would come out, and there'd be like the film of like 4 CDRs. And then I was also a mini disc kid, because to me, to be able to fit 4 albums on one mini disc cassette, fantastic, excellent. I could fit all my Eminem albums on one little cassette. And yeah, there's just something, like I say, tangible, and a connection to these things. And I have niece and nephews, and they'll, I'm like, what do you think this is? And they're like, no, it's like, there's a film on this videotape, and they're like, what? Like, it just goes over their head. But to me, it's something about owning these things, because all my favorite films are on streaming services. And, I get it. The film industry has found a way to, replenish the income that piracy, I think, took away from them. And that's by a subscription model. You're always paying for something, but you're never owning anything. So they've got it both ways now. You don't own the content. They can take it away at any time when a license expires, and you've got to subscribe to it. So you could be comfortable. And to me, I know this is like a weird parallel, but it's like having a concert in your life and then that constant then disappearing, be it a person, be it anything. And with media, it's very much the same with these streaming services. If I own something, I own it forever. And to me, there's something about owning your own art, the stuff that gets you through the day, or just an escape. Like you say, the Hellraiser, the new Hellraiser film that's come out. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and that's me like, oh, I cannot wait so I can just sit down and enjoy it. Because Hellraiser, I watched the original when I was such a young kid, and it had such an effect on me. And to me, it's still probably, for me at least, the greatest British horror film ever made. So but you look forward to these things. They are events. It's like, oh, I can't wait to watch the new Chucky TV series, or the Freddy versus Jason poster that you have behind you. I saw it in the cinema 4 times because I lived on the Friday the 13th message boards when I was a kid. And this film, this Freddy versus Jason, would always be in development, always be in development. And then it finally came out, and it was such an event, and it was something to look forward to, and it was something to live for. Especially when you're a kid obsessed with horror films, you live for these moments. You live for the new Toxic Avenger movie. You live for, and the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack is so badass. It really kind of encapsulates, like the early 2000s, the new metal, the Roadrunner records, etc. And to me, that's like a slice of life right there. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that you'd brought up in that just now has been like the just talking about like physical media and like the kind of collections that you accumulate over time. And like I know that like for friends that are fellow collectors, like it has also been a almost a means of like therapy to like have like this like entire experience where it's like you look forward to something, getting away from physical media. Like let's say like you're looking forward to like the new Hellraiser, the new Chucky series returning, the Halloween Ends, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, whatever the film is or the event, like maybe your favorite band's coming to town. It's such a one of the things that we started doing when we were starting to like create content that was more mental health focused is the importance of setting those events in your life and what the effect it does on your mental health is. Like, all right, like, hey, like I'm looking forward to this new like horror movie, and if I can make it until October 28th, then that's a success. And then once that event is coming to life, what's the next event that I'm looking forward to? And creating a cycle out of that, because it really kind of starts to flip the perspective on things that you can and cannot do when it comes to depression. And depression, I feel like, likes to whisper into your ear that you're not enough and that you should take your life and that like your life would be so much better if you weren't here. All of these lies that, we as mental health advocates and other mental health advocacies programs and content creators as well has also like tried to like combat against. That depression is nothing more than like a liar, but like setting up those like life events and kind of like flipping the script, like even saying something as I woke up today, like that completely flips the script on depression. Just being thankful for today and this moment, it really does matter.
Completely agree. You really need to kind of be one step ahead of, like you say, just flipping it on its head. There was a time in 2017 when I was at my darkest point, and I took out all of my savings in the bank account, and I decided to go to Chicago for the weekend with my best friend, paid for him to go and everything. And Chicago, there's a wrestling show on, and I wanted to see the Child's Play locations, etc., from the original movie. And it was just for 3 days, but I always had it in the back of my mind that when I return, that'll be it. I'm going to check out, and I'm so glad I didn't, because as cliche as it sounds, life does get better. It truly does. I mean, I'm probably the happiest I've been in a long time. Touch wood. But there is ups and downs. It's not just, to me, it's all about the journey. It's not about the destination. And to me, as long as you will have downs, you've got to accept that. But you also got to accept that you're gonna have these ups again. It's never, these things. It's life is cyclic. Things will get better, and people do say that, but seriously, man, I can completely say that it does. And I think for anyone listening to this, that I got, can see parallels to what we're both talking about and can relate. Just know that things will get better. And that might sound so pandering, and it might sound so kind of disingenuous, especially when you're at the lowest point. It truly does. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there. And sometimes you've got to rewrite your own ending, or not even ending. You just got to, life is like one big film where you just constantly have to give it a M. Night Shyamalan kind of like swerve, right? So
Sure.
when you think suicide's got you, you give that suicide the middle finger, and you just like, we live for another day, because that's we're all characters in our own kind of reality. And to me, music is also a great escape. Music's a great soundtrack to life. And to me, there's nothing more punk rock than, telling these suicidal thoughts, just to, go fuck yourself, and, you live another day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just well spoken, like to where you just kind of constantly need to like remind yourself also too, like we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I've been almost living exclusively, like when it comes to TV this year, in Twin Peaks. It's been a great comfort show for me. David Lynch has definitely become my favorite director this year. And uh there's a line where he talks about like Dale Cooper kind of turns to Sheriff Truman and just says, to the extent of, treat yourself, just buy yourself a gift once a day. And the impact that one line, like, just feeling like a throwaway episode of the series has like had on me is just immense. Like even if I just take 5 minutes and I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna watch, this short film from a favorite filmmaker, or I am gonna go see a band that I really love, or whatever that treat looks like to yourself. Even going to like Starbucks and getting yourself like an expensive fancy coffee. Like, I mean, treat yourself and understand that like self-love and self-care like matter, and that they mean a whole lot. Because um like you said, like you talked about like being at your lowest point, and like there are some days where like, man, that depression, it's still something that like, even after years of uh trying to find escapes and openly talking about it, and wrestling with addiction and stuff like that, like there's still days where I'm just like, man, like, why am I here? And it's like having a just flipping the script on those expectations has definitely meant, it's definitely helped me. It's not the sole thing that's like kind of kept me here, but it's definitely had an impact.
Oh, dude, I completely agree. And it's funny that you mentioned Twin Peaks, because so my birthday is May 20th, and that's when in 2017 I went to Chicago for the weekend. And that same weekend, the return of Twin Peaks premiered on TV. And I remember coming back from Chicago, and I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. And to me, to watch the return, that like, when it came out, I came back to Chicago, that really helped. That really helped. To me, season 3 of Twin Peaks is the greatest uh, piece of TV, or the greatest, for me at least, the greatest thing David Lynch has ever created. the roller coaster of emotions. I just living through these characters again, and I mean, I don't want to spoil it for anybody if no one's seen it, but just I will say, like, the idea of being able to live again. Um, have you seen season? Have you watched all of Twin Peaks?
Oh yeah. I've been through that series front to back twice. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. To me, like, especially season three, it's such an experience, and it's such a, you live by like, the character of Dougie, for example. I saw that as me in a way, being unable to be myself, just kind of like living day to day, in very numb to a lot of things. And then you see Dougie slowly remember things like, damn good coffee, pie, and he's slowly becoming Cooper again. And to me, I think that's such a great analogy for depression. And to me, the soundtrack to Twin Peaks: The Return really helped. I'd listen to the playlists on Spotify the whole time and just kind of live in that world, because to me, that was like a little bit of an escape. And yeah, man, like, seriously, man, yeah, David, like we're just talking about, these things that do save your life. They are events, they are milestones. And to me, to be able to live in the town of Twin Peaks one more time was just, it felt like, you say, a present. And I felt like after Chicago in May 2017, and I really thought I was going to end it. And I put on Twitter, I watched Twin Peaks. I'm not saying like Twin Peaks, but Twin Peaks really did give me a reason, to stay around. And and people, it might sound silly to some people, but media is, and art and everything is just so important to me. It really does. It really is. To some, it's disposable. To me, it's life.
Yeah, I agree. I think that like media has had like a such a positive effect on me. Like I shared earlier about like how becoming a cinephile like really kind of uh was like my first true escape out of depression, and like so much so that like I have like a half sleeve here that it's like in dedication with my with to my grandmother. I have, like, I have her name, I have bird carrying a Under Oath lyric, and then like I have a film reel that kind of like wraps around it all, because like I love film, and I love the type of stories you can tell, and the kind of I think it's one of the reasons that like to kind of close it out, like to and bring it back to Eating Miss Campbell. I think that's one of the reasons I was so drawn to your film, is because it's a great example of how many different topics you can commentate on and create a satire on, and such a limited period of space. I think if I remember correctly, like Eating Miss Campbell is like it's either under 90 minutes or it's just at 90 minutes, somewhere around that. But
Yeah.
you touch on so many different things, and even kind of flipping the script on what we think is like societal norms. I think we're not really getting into it, but like two characters in particular, like the Ethan Rembrandt character, is kind of this always like, boys will be boys kind of mentality. Like he's the personification of that. And like how men, we are kind of we always feel like we're quote unquote in power. And that's not always the case, because sometimes you have to say like, I need help, or I suck in this area of life, blah blah blah. And then also I can't remember the character's name, but Danny Thompson, who plays the
Deets.
kind of the school, yeah, Dietz.
Yeah.
She kind of flips the script on what we as a society think of when it comes to pedophilia, where it's typically a man pursuing a young boy. This one is an older woman pursuing a younger male. And I think that, a platform for film to speak volumes on these subjects is really important. and it helps to kind of remind us that we're not alone. So like even if we're like jumping into a film for 2 hours, and they're kind of talking about like struggling with sexuality or mortality or depression, or questioning if there's an afterlife, like is there a God, is there not a God. I think that these questions help us to not feel so alone, but also connect us with other people that are having that viewing experience as well.
Oh, complete 110% completely. And to me, as an independent filmmaker, and I say that from someone who's only made two films in like 10 years, but but as a creative, to me, as an independent creative, it's our responsibility to deal with subject matters that the mainstream are too afraid, or they see as taboo to deal with. To me, we live in a time when anyone can make a film. But to me, it's like any endeavor, you need to have something to say. And I think a lot of Hollywood movies, etc., they're great for disposable entertainment pieces. I grew up on the summer blockbuster like we all did, like event films, and I love them as well. Not every film needs to be a lesson whatsoever, but I think with independent filmmaking, there's so much that the Hollywood elite don't want to dabble into because they don't want to really ruffle any feathers. To me, my favorite shit disturber is Lloyd Kaufman. I saw not just Lloyd Kaufman, but like I grew up on Tom Green. I grew up on Trey Parker, Matt Stone. I grew up on a lot of people that dared to be different and dared to do things. Yeah, yes. Oh my God, I have the same Region 1 DVD of Freddy Got Fingered.
God, I love this movie.
Oh, dude, Freddy Got Fingered is a masterpiece. It really is. In fact, you may not know, but we have a Tom Green song in Eating-Miss-Campbell. So when Sawyer is shooting people on the staircase during the All-You-Can-Eat Massacre, and it's the slow motion, that's a Tom Green track called Far Too Young to Die. And there's a lyric in it talking about meaningless absurdity. And to me, that's a great parallel of what school massacres are. Meaningless absurdity.
That's wild. And Tom Green's one of the very few like comedians that like I've followed into my adulthood. I don't know. He's a wild guy, and like it's interesting to see how he's kind of like mellowed out, and like also like dealt with his like own fear and depression and vulnerability in his own podcast, the Tom Green Show, I think is what it's called now. It's a great show, great podcast. But yeah, I think that this. Yeah, there's been a lot we've addressed in this episode. The movie is called Eating Miss Campbell, and it's currently making its festival runs right now. I honestly cannot wait to add it to my collection. It's one of my favorite films of this year. I think it does have the power to be really offensive, but I think once you kind of get past that offense, I think this movie has such a beautiful character journey and subtext that is just legitimately like terrifying to kind of think about, and it really challenges the viewers. So you guys, if it's coming through to a city near you, please check it out. But where can people follow you online?
Yeah, dude. So I'm all over social media. So they can follow me at Refuse Liam. That's Refuse. And then Liam spelled Liam on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can follow the movie at Eating Campbell. So Instagram is Eating Campbell, Twitter Eating Campbell. But yeah, man, if there's any aspiring filmmakers out there as well that want to make films and want any advice, I'm more than happy to give advice. When I started out, there's not like there were Lloyd Kaufman was the only person that gave me honest advice. I spoke to a lot of filmmakers that were too proud to admit of their failures or too proud to admit of how the distribution part of it it screws up first time filmmakers. But if people can learn from my mistakes, I'm more than happy to give advice. And just if anyone wants to reach out about anything, I'm more than happy to speak to anybody. So yeah, follow me on those. Fuse Liam, Liam Regan, if you just want to search for me. Yeah, feel free to follow or add.
You guys can follow me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia, and also you guys can follow me via TikTok. I am at Gent Ghostface. That's Gent. Or you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. And most importantly, you guys can also check out our mental health resource library. It's the reason why we create the content we do. And so until next time, remember that nostalgia is cancer.
That's right. And what's more, what's the other tagline we've got? Oh yeah, what is more poetic and American than a high school massacre? Which I think is the more offensive tagline than nostalgia is cancer, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, stay nostalgic, guys.